But we do have another great number 80 on the program with us. Returning to the program is wide receiver Kaipo McGuire, joining us on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Kaipo, welcome back to BYU Sports Nation.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Why did you pick the number 80 specifically at BYU?
Very, very simple. Jerry Rice wore number 80, and he's a childhood hero of mine. So when I had the chance, I jumped at it in high school and been 80 throughout my college career.
So when you showed up at BYU, did you have to fight an upperclassman for number 80, or was it like a senior had already graduated and you just got it?
Well, good news is Otis Sterling wore number 80, and I redshirted. So when he graduated, I stepped right in. So it was easy, but I was willing to pay, just like the NFL, just minus a few zeros.
The great number 80, Kaipo McGuire, patterned himself after Jerry Rice. What are you up to now? What's going on these days?
Well, since I believe we spoke 2 years ago, I've what we call PCS, Permanent Change of Station in the military. So I am back at the United States Air Force Academy, working in the athletic department. For the past year, I've been the director of the Human Performance Lab, particularly working on the mental performance with our athletes.
Oh, very nice. So that's become a thing in sports more, is kind of the mental side of it. BYU has its own, kind of mental sports coach and Dr. Craig Manning. How have you seen that evolve over the last couple of years and play a bigger role in sports?
Well, I think it's huge. We always talk about taking a holistic approach here at the Air Force Academy, not just looking at the physical, but looking at every aspect, such as the spiritual or the mental side of it, or even the nutrition side of it, right? So when you take it from a holistic approach, you look at the problem from so many different ways, right? We always see the nice weight rooms, the plyometrics, the track. We see all those things. But everybody has that when you get to the Division I level and even higher. Everybody can run fast. Everybody can jump high. It's that mental component that really separates the greats from everyone else.
What made you mentally strong at BYU when you played receiver?
Wow. Well, someone always nipping at your position. So there's so much talent, and when you're, we talked about it last time. When you're 5-0, 100-0, and you're not very athletic like myself, then there's always somebody better behind you. So you kind of focus on the intangibles, and one of those intangibles is the mental side of the game. So having that confidence that you are going to do well, preparing yourself, and looking at the X's and O's, if you will.
I didn't realize until recently that not only did you play, I knew you played in the NFL a little bit, but NFL Europe, and in the XFL. What was the XFL like?
A lot of people ask me that, and XFL version 2.0 is coming out. It was great football. So other than the NFL, in my opinion, there was more talent in the XFL than the CFL, which I played in, and even NFL Europe. What I saw was it was made up of a lot of guys that frankly made too much money for being just special teamers, if you know what I mean. So there were 3, 4, 5-year-old veterans that would be purely special teams players in the NFL, and I think that's what really made up the XFL.
Kaipo McGuire with us on BYU Sports Nation. Talking with him about not only 80 days away from BYU's football season beginning, but that difficult schedule that is bearing down on the Cougars. How would the 1996 team fare against the likes of Arizona, Cal, Wisconsin? I know you played Washington. BYU's at Washington again.
Let's play that one again in 96.
At Boise State, at Utah. What do you think, Kaipo?
So am I referencing these teams in 1996 or how they are today?
How they are today. 96. Okay, before we even go there, hold on. Tell me the story at Washington. Was there a jersey issue before the game?
Well, there's a lot of rumors about socks issues, right?
Socks
issue. I didn't see it. I know there was some rumblings going around, but at the end of the day, we just didn't play well. Did it feed into it? Maybe, but it was so small that I don't think it would have affected the outcome. They played well, we didn't, and we lost, I believe, by 12 points.
It's been a question 22 years in the making, Kaipo. Thank you.
Socks. Socks. And, I believe they sacked us 7-8 times, so that didn't help, right?
That didn't help. Okay, so 1996 BYU versus the 2018 opponents, that BYU is going to face this year?
Okay. So I have it up on my computer screen right now, and I think you guys know me. I would flat out say we would win every single game, but let me step out of my shell and look at this unbiased, if you will. So I think the three ones that really stand out would be, of course, Wisconsin, Washington, and, of course, Utah, because they're a rival. So out of those three, if we're going to Wisconsin first, that'd be tough, right? That would be tough.
Yeah.
It'd be a close game. I think we would squeak one out, but we'd come out on top. I think if we went to Washington, and I believe some people have them winning the Pac-12 this year. Well, most people
they're
do.
top 10 preseason.
Yes. I'm going to say we beat them as well.
The Sox are in order. You're ready to play.
That's right. Lavelle says, enough talk of the Sox, just play, and we beat them. So I think we'd be undefeated going into the Utah game.
Wow.
And it's at Rice Echoes, everything on the line, kind of like our year for our division of the WAC back then. And I think we'll pull it off. I'm trying to be unbiased as possible, but just looking at our team, assuming that we are all healthy and we have those two great corners and a great run defense, I think we'll be okay. I think we go undefeated. I do.
That's completely biased, but we love it. This is BYUtv, Kaipo. The amazing thing about like the 96 Utah game specifically, Steve Sarkisian threw 12 passes.
Correct.
You were like, did you have a catch in that game? Were you even targeted?
I was the leading receiver with like 2 catches for 30-something yards.
It was like 300-plus rushing yards. Brian McKenzie and Ronnie Jenkins running wild. I hopped down onto the field and got caught, and they tried to escort me somewhere else, and then I snuck my way around onto the field after the game. I was like, we just beat Utah by 20. This is great. I'm getting down here. I'm like 12 years old or whatever. It's been a long time.
I love that. We're going to get back. We're going to get back to beating Utah. It's just a matter of time, and it's going to be sooner than people think.
Why do you feel like BYU is going to get back? What gives you confidence that the Cougars not only will bounce back from last year's 4-9 season, but they'll be in a position to beat teams of the caliber of Utah and end that streak?
Culture. Getting back to that winning culture of what made BYU a national brand. Just getting back to those grassroots beliefs that Kalani is going to instill and enforce. And I only see what the media does. I'm not there day to day, but from what I read, it's pretty much getting back to the roots is what I take from it. And that's the beginning. In the 80s, in the 90s, when BYU was doing it, we need to go back and take some lessons from those teams.
How much of a wide receiver success revolves around the quarterback and the offensive line play versus what the receiver can control himself?
It's a symbiotic relationship. I always have this conversation. In my opinion, the greatest running back of all time is Barry Sanders. That's me. And his line was horrible. If he was on the Cowboys, I know it'll never happen, but I have no idea how many yards he would have rushed for. I mean, he's just phenomenal. But it's very symbiotic. One cannot be successful without the other. So you could have a great quarterback, but if he doesn't have time, he can't get the ball off. He can have great receivers if they're wide open, but the quarterback's getting sacked because the line's not doing their job. It really doesn't matter. So a lot of times, and you guys know this, when NFL scouts come in, you may not have the gaudy numbers, but they know you're doing your job. So they see if you're getting open, if you have that talent and all that. That's a little different conversation, but in terms of being successful stat-wise and eventually translating to wins, it's very symbiotic.
Kaipo McGuire with us on BYU Sports Nation, making his return trip 80 days away from BYU opening the season at Arizona with number 80 on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. Kaipo, what's at the core of a great wide receiver?
Wow, that's a tough question. Being a little guy who definitely focuses on all the intangibles, I would say want. Right? Kind of that desire, that burning fire inside, because that's the one thing that drives everybody. If you have the want and the desire to be successful, then everything else will fall in place. Assuming you have a basement level of talent. When you really want something and is dedicated to achieving that, then you do what it takes to work on the other parts of your game.
What do you think of BYU as an independent?
Wow. Well, I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you will. But I know financially we're doing better than if we were in our previous conference.
Yes.
And there are positives and negatives for both of that. There's no conference championship. There's no, unless you go undefeated, realistically, there's no chance to get into one of the bigger bowls. And even that is in question if you look at UCF this past year. It's tough. The good thing is you play the Wisconsins and the Washingtons and the Arizonas, and the bad part is you play the Wisconsins, the Washingtons, and the Arizonas. So there's a lot of big names that you have on your schedule, but you have to win those games, and it's tough to win those games. There's a reason the SEC is the toughest. One week you play Florida, the next you play Georgia, and so on and so forth. It's tough. So in terms of independence, that's way above my pay grade and something I have the luxury of not worrying about. I do like seeing these big name teams on the schedule, but I'm just not so sure if we can sustain it any longer. We need to get in a Power 5 conference, in my opinion, if at all possible.
Kaipo, it's been great to talk with you and reconnect. We'll finish with this. Who was the better wide receiver at BYU, you or Kale Louie?
Toss-up.
Good political answer.
Safe route.
Yes, sir. Hey, thanks for the time, Kaipo.
No problem.